Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Aloha, everybody. Happy Sunday. Oh, man, am I looking unkempt. It's time to shave. Oh, well. Hope everybody's doing well. We actually finally got some rain yesterday. First rain we've had since May. And I tell you what, it felt good. It's a lot cooler than it has been, that's for certain. Okay, let's see here. Today we're gonna answer any questions y'all may have had on the video that went out earlier this morning um, about part 4 of the Absolute Beginner series. I never meant to actually start posting the Absolute Beginner series consecutively like this. I meant to do it every other video. But things going on with the CNC router have kind of precluded it. I've still got to get cleaned up and trim the head so I can finish up a rotary axis video that I've had half done for quite some time now. But other real life just keeps interfering. So before we get into questions, though, I see Jerry already has a question out there, and I'll get to it real quick here. I want to give a shout out and say thank you to my friend Steve with Harniel Media. You see him out there in the chat. He is my only moderator on my channel. And he runs a tidy little ship over there at harnielmedia.com. He sponsors my website, and he can take care of yours as well. We're all makers here. We're all making products or providing services that we want to get out to the masses. And there's no better way to do it than with your website, your web store, your e-commerce site. And Steve can help you set all of that up. That eliminates any middleman. That eliminates any other website or e-commerce site that's going to charge you a hefty commission to put your goods and services in front of people. Something else to think about is it also gives you legitimacy. There are a lot of companies out there who have sponsorship deals or affiliate programs. And if you're thinking about getting involved with any of them, most of them require a website. They want to see your web presence, and social media, by some, not all, social media is usually not enough. So something to think about. Steve, his services are excellent. I mean, I can't praise him enough. He's very, very competitively priced. And what I love most about Steve is he gives you performance. He doesn't try to convince you that you can live without something. If you want it on your website, you'll get it. And he gives you performances. Performances? No, he doesn't give performances, but he gives performance, not excuses. So do yourself a favor. There's a link to Harniel Media in every video and every live stream on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. So do yourself a favor, click that link, get over to Harniel Media, hit the contact us link, and shoot him a message. He'll talk with you. He'll work with you. Thank you, Steve, for everything that you do. I appreciate you more than I can ever tell you, or more than you can ever know. So Harniel Media, sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC.com. Get over there and check him out. Okay. Now, when we we were having a little discussion earlier about dinner tonight. As we do, if you get here early, you never know what I'm going to talk about. We got to talk about barbecue earlier. So let's see. I got into part 4 where I delved a little bit deeper into a couple of the other options within the pocket toolpath and within the profile toolpath. I didn't delve into all of them. As I explained earlier in, I want to say it was part 2, maybe it was part 3. I don't remember which. They're all starting to run together. But I explained that the profile toolpath is the most complex of the toolpaths, mainly because there are so many options and so many choices available. It's sometimes hard to wrap your head around. Well, I'm a major proponent of easing into things in that you can give so much information, it all starts to run together and go swimming through your head. Information overload is very easy for me to achieve. And my brain just shuts down. I get blinders on, and people start sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher, you know. So I try to take it in small steps and introduce new things, new ideas, and new concepts in maybe a structured manner, maybe not so structured manner, but hopefully it makes a little bit of sense. And as such, I didn't get into a lot of the options in the profile toolpath. Um, I mentioned up here when we're getting into allowance offset, I kind of left that for later because there's a lot involved in that when you're depending upon whether you're talking about machining outside or inside a vector. Um, I talked a little bit about ramps. I mentioned zigzags, but I never mentioned a spiral ramp. Those I'll get into again later on in other videos, mainly because they're more advanced and it's real easy to lose track of the scope of the project if you start talking about other things that don't have anything to do with the project. It's the same with leads, and it's the same with vector starting order or the order to approach the tool path or where to start. However, I do always check for sharp outside corners, sharp external corners. So I will get into each of these as time progresses, mainly because rather than flood you with information on a tool path to the point to where you don't know what you're looking at, it my approach is to take it in a logical manner in which you would apply it to a real world project. And like that simple, that basic clock face is that type of a project. Um, I approached the pocket tool path the same way to let folks know that there is a way to A, drill holes, B, drill multiple sizes of holes at the same time with the same tool path, as long as they're all going to the same depth, and that you don't have to drill all the way through. Now, there is more than one way to drill a hole. I mean, if we look at, we've got a drilling tool path here, but the drilling tool path will only drill straight down. There are a few options to use, but it will only drill a hole the size of the bit. It won't drill a hole larger than the bit. You can use the profile tool path to drill a hole as well. Time-wise, they take about the same, but you have various options. And if you have a way that works well for you, then you're doing it right. Sometimes, I say it a lot in some of my videos, sometimes there is no best. Sometimes the best is the way that works for you, gives you the result you want, works safely, and is something that you're used to using and you can incorporate into your workflow. There is no, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you use a profile or a pocket, you're going to achieve the same goal. So, for instance, Wendell says, peck drill, pause at bottom, no pause at bottom. Yeah, those are several options to be used within the drilling toolpath, and each has their each has pros and cons depending upon what you're drilling, how deep you're drilling it, and uh, your bit selection. So rather than throw in a bunch of stuff all at once and make people walk away shaking their head going, what the heck did I just watch? I try to incorporate it into something that you can wrap your head around and putting it in a real world situation. I find at least it works for me. So, all right. I don't. So if anybody has any questions at all about part 4, by all means, throw them over here in the chat. I don't see any questions on it yet, but Jerry has a question on epoxy inlays. To what grit do you sand, and what finish do you use, and why? That is a difficult question because I'm going to give the answer that nobody wants to hear, and that is it depends. It depends on the purpose of the project, number one, and it depends on the finish you're going to use. There are I use a couple of different finishes on epoxy projects. If there is even the remotest possibility that it's going to come into contact with food, I use a food safe finish. So far, Odie's oil, and I'm going to be trying some bumbleshoots here pretty soon. I've not used it. I want to try it. I want to check it out. And that is a rubbed oil finish, but that's mainly because of it's food grade, and they're all specifically state food grade. I've got the documentation from them that I can give the potential user and let them know that, yes, this is food grade. If it's something that's got to be hung on a wall and just looked at, it depends on the type of finish I want. If I want a real glossy finish, I'll do a flood coat with clear epoxy. Because I know that it's compatible with the epoxy. There's going to be no problem with interaction so long as I use the same brand. Because each epoxy maker has its own little, they have their own little recipes and their own little methods that they have found that works for them, and they recommend their customers use. If I'm looking for more of a satin finish, one of the dirty little secrets, I guess it's not a dirty little secret, but most of them don't advertise this. Just about, I won't say all, but the overwhelming majority of countertop epoxies and even the deep pour epoxies meant for casting and what have you, most of them are urethane based. So a spray polyurethane or even a brush-on polyurethane finish is compatible with those epoxies. Check with the manufacturer first before you shoot an epoxy finish over it. But for instance, let me dig out a picture here. The Pirate inlay that the Pirate inlay, epoxy inlay that I did. Come on, Mark, find the picture. And there we go. That was finished with satin urethane because it's meant to be hung on the wall and seen from, a distance. It's not meant to be handled. It's not meant to be used as a cutting board or anything like that. So it's basically up to you. It depends on what type of finish you're looking for. Like I said, for a gloss finish, I'll do a flood coat of a countertop epoxy. If I'm looking for a satin finish, I'll use a satin polyurethane. How high do I sand? This was sanded to 220, and that's it. You can go crazy sanding and polishing. Shane Peters, who is one of my epoxy gurus, he does epoxy inlays on end grain cutting boards. And when he uses Odie's oil as well, but he will go so far as to, he sands, I believe, up to 4,000. And then he switches over, he masks off the wood and then switches over to polishing compounds and a high speed buffer. And I mean, he'll make that, I mean, a glossy, beautiful, beautiful finish. And, but he goes way over the deep end on that. He also charges a pretty penny for it as well. I believe his, I don't want to price his work, but high 3 digits and 4 digits prices we're talking for his work. But it just depends on, I won't say overboard, it depends on how high you want to go. The thing about epoxy is the minute you put a clear coat over it, it's going to fill in those scratches. So, like I said, this Pirate, that was sanded up to 220 grit. The whole thing was sanded up to 220 grit, and then 3 coats of a satin polyurethane, and that was it. If I'm doing a flood coat of epoxy, I sanded 220 because the clear layer is going to fill in any scratches or marks. So I just want a nice smooth surface with some tooth so that the new coat of epoxy is going to stick to it. So that's more or less what I do. I will say this, Jerry, I know that you're a channel member. Tomorrow, Rob Sandstrom, my other epoxy guru, is going to be doing a presentation. We're going to talk about epoxy inlays. So if you can make it tomorrow evening, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, and the link is on the community tab on my, here on YouTube, on my community tab. We can get into that and see how far he goes with his sanding. I don't think he goes as crazy as Shane Peters does, but I know he does get in there. I'm telling you what. Let's see. Butch Miller wants to know, so many epoxies out there. Agreed. Recommendation for basic epoxy inlays, not thick pour. I went with, I'm going to have to try to remember. They called themselves the Epoxy Resin Store. I'm not affiliated. I pay full price, same as everybody else. They called themselves the Epoxy Resin Store, and I want to say it was called Clearcast 7000. And it's a countertop epoxy. Most of them are made to be poured an eighth of an inch. Some of them will say up to a quarter of an inch. The dirty little secret is, and this is a dirty little secret, a lot of the epoxy sellers get their epoxy from the same manufacturer. So that's why you'll see such a similarity in the directions. I'm not going to name any brand names simply because I cannot confirm that, yes, they use this manufacturer or that manufacturer. But I believe it was called Clearcast 7000, and it worked very well, and it wasn't super expensive. Plain and simply put, and I think Kimberly Went can back me up on this. epoxy is just flat out expensive. So be careful of the kind that you use. There is also polyester resin and things of that nature for fiberglass work. I don't use polyester resin. I use epoxy, which is a urethane-based product. I am trying some Alumilite Clear Slow this time. I know a lot of people like Total Boat, epoxy. Um, it's basically, I hesitate to say it's up to you. I would just say choose a brand and stick with that brand. That way you've got compatibility. When it comes to pigments and dyes, the sky's pretty much the limit. There are mica powders out there like eye candy or black diamond. Uh, those are good pigments. They are powders and they have little mica flakes in them, and you'll get that metallic look. There are opaque liquid dyes. Some epoxies will take acrylic craft paint. You have to be careful how much you put in, and a little bit goes a long way, especially on something like black. Oh my God, a little bit of black goes a long way. I mean, if you take a toothpick and rub the inside of the lid of the paint bottle, that'll do 1 ounce of epoxy, and it'll be just solid black. Believe me. Um, and there are transparent epoxies, translucent epoxies that will just tint the epoxy, but you'll still be able to see through it. So there are lots of choices as far as tints are concerned. Generally speaking, I tend to try to go with one of the bigger name brands, like, again, Eye Candy or Black Diamonds, or uh, check the website of the epoxy manufacturer you're going with. Like if you go with Total Boat, check what they recommend for tints. But you really can't go wrong if you stick with what the manufacturer is recommending, because, I mean, they made it. So, okay, Lewis Denton has one here. My son installed a new revised operating system that required reloading a spire. In the process, I lost my original fonts. Question is, what is the best way to recover? Can I go back? Okay. VCarve, Aspire, Cut 2D, they all use the fonts that are installed in your fonts folder. And that's the secret. They have to be installed. I'm going to try to find it. Let's bring it up here. I used to remember where the fonts folder is. Let's see here. I'll go to my C drive and I'll search my C drive looking for fonts. And there it is right there. There's my fonts folder. To wake it up. Hello. And those are the fonts that I have installed. 1,318 fonts. Oh, man. So the thing is, they have to be installed on your computer. The only fonts, well, Martin Pearson has started to answer your question here. The only fonts that install with the Vectric software are the single line fonts. Yeah, that is true. I don't think Vectric has any of their own fonts. You said a revised operating system. I don't know if that means, for instance, you went back to Windows 10 from Windows 11, or if that means that you installed some other operating system. But there should be some fonts that came installed with Windows. Other than that, man, I'm trying to think of, if the hard drive wasn't formatted, it's possible that that folder may still be there, but I doubt it. If it was overwritten, Lewis is asking, with Windows or Aspire? With Windows. Aspire, bring it back in here. Aspire accesses all of these fonts in your Windows folder. This is some of these fonts were installed by Windows with, on this computer, Windows 10. Some of these fonts were installed with photo editing software. Some of them were installed with word processors that I've downloaded and added. Some were installed with imaging software. I said that, photo imaging software. Some were installed with, oh, come on, graphics software. Couldn't think of the word graphics. Graphics software. So if you've added like Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator or any of these other programs, they will install fonts on your computer as well. This is the folder. It's a Windows folder that is accessed by Aspire. It doesn't have any separate fonts of its own. Eric Girth makes an excellent point as well. If you downloaded any fonts, they may be in your downloads folder. If they are, like, now I don't think I have downloaded any fonts here. Maybe I have. Let's look in my downloads folder. And let's see, do I have a TTF file here? No, I want to sort by type. Do I have any TTF? Yes, there is a font right there. These TTF fonts. When you download a font, it has to be installed. If you have this .ttf file, you can just right-click and click install, and it'll install it in that folder. But as Martin says, if your operating system has been reinstalled, that downloads folder has probably been wiped. And you said it was your son that did this. You might talk with your son about this. To see if maybe a recovery program will be able to scan your hard drive and see is it still there in the background somewhere. It probably isn't. There may not be a way to recover. You may have to go individually, either install all of these fonts. For instance, if you have Photoshop, you might have to install Photoshop to get those fonts back. If you don't, or if you just downloaded a bunch of fonts, you may have to go back and download those again. It sucks, but this is, Martin makes a good case here. I always back up my font folder, so if I get a new computer or lose a hard drive, I can reinstall them. And that's a good point, well made. Howdy, Brooks. Brooks Martin says, "See, Windows font is the path." Yeah, let me do that. I'll just go to local disk C over here, then go into Windows, and there's the fonts folder right there, rather than doing a search. It's the same folder that I just showed a minute ago. That one there. And cool thing about it is it also gives you a little sample of what that font looks like. So it's I mean, I'm not sharing. Hello. There we are. Let me close that and I'll go back to it. I'll just open up File Explorer. I'll come down here to local disk C, go into my Windows folder and scroll down a little bit. And there is the fonts folder. Open up the fonts folder and there it is. So it's a good idea to back it up as Martin suggested. And this doesn't take much. We're looking at the folder here. Let's right click and a way I used to be able to get I'll have to go back. I'll right click on the folder and go to properties. It's 1 gigabyte. You can back that up on a thumb drive. You can back that up on a OneDrive or Dropbox or one of those services. And another thing to think about is if you have downloaded a bunch of fonts and they are in your downloads folder, back up that downloads folder as well. I am not affiliated with these people at all, but I use a service called Carbonite and it backs up my entire PC. That way, worst case scenario, as Martin alludes to, if I get a new computer or I lose a hard drive, I can either download a complete clone of my old hard drive, or I can pick and choose folders to download onto the new computer. It's not expensive. They have an annual program. It's not super expensive, and it works in the background. I mean, when you first download it, create an account, download the utility, and run it, it will slowly over time, as you're not using your computer, it'll make a copy of your entire computer and store it on the cloud. And when you, if you need it, no, when you need it, and you will, you can log into your account and get your backups from there. But it does it unobtrusively in the background when you're not using your computer. I've never had a conflict where Carbonite was doing something when I needed to do something. And I don't have to think about it. I pay the fee once a year and it's done. So, but that's insurance. And I don't put all my eggs in one basket. I have files on various cloud services. But that may be too late, but for you, but maybe here's hoping not. Maybe not. So talk to him, and maybe a recovery program might be able to go in and search your drive and find that install file. But if not, you may have to go download them over again and start from scratch. And that is worst case scenario. So sorry, I don't have better news for you. Bull wanted me to mention, and he's absolutely right. Okay, that is enough to guide my son to resolve the issue. He's the guru. Thanks a million. Well, you're more than welcome. Just I be careful with that kind of thing. So Laser 314 says, with my 24M internet access, online backups are painful. I keep an external SSD for that. I have external drives as well. I've got two on my main design computers, 2 terabyte and 4 terabyte. Then I have a 1 terabyte on my other computer in the other room. I don't have I have an internal backup hard drives in this one, a spinner, but I don't have an external SSD here. What I do for that is I try to set up, like if I'm going to put a bunch of files on my OneDrive or my Google Drive, I will get them all figured out and ready to go. And then I start uploading to that drive as I'm heading out to go to bed and let it handle it overnight. It almost always, there's a few times that something will happen and it'll drop, like if Windows forces a update. But I figure I'm in bed. I don't care what the computer is doing. Let it upload then. I don't worry about that now, but back in the dial-up days, that's what I did. I would set things up to either upload or download overnight while I was sleeping. Bob Hiltebridle makes a good point. You might have a folder that's called Old Windows, or a folder with an extension .old, or files with the extension .old. Those are the old files. You might look for those, but it's enough to kind of dig around and see. But odds are, Lewis, that when he installed the new operating system, it wiped that fonts folder, and the only way to recover is to install the old software to get those fonts, or not the operating system, but like Photoshop or Illustrator or Inkscape or any of those that add fonts. Some word processors add their own fonts as well. But usually it wipes the fonts folder clean when you install a new operating system. Let's see here. Troy Pritchard says, if I download a font, I download them to a special folder just for fonts before I install them. Yeah, that's another good route to take. I put them on my main design computer in there. I put them in a fonts folder in the downloads folder. It's a subfolder, and that's where I download all of the install files, whether it be a zip file or something else, and then I unzip within that folder. So, and then that gets uploaded onto the cloud. That way, if I have this issue, I know where to go to get them. So, let's see. We have another, and if you have any questions at all about anything, by all means, please do put them over here in the comments. Eric Girth wants to know, do you use a moisture meter? I don't have a moisture meter. I should get one. I don't have a moisture meter just simply because it hasn't come up yet. I really need to get one. I just don't have one yet. I haven't decided whether I want to go with a pinless moisture meter or if I want to go with the pin type moisture meter. They both have their pros and cons. There are times when you can't really drill holes for a pin type meter. I just don't know about the accuracy. So I would defer to other folks. Maybe somebody in here has used both types. What do you find to be the most accurate, the pinned moisture meter or the pinless? But I used one back in the cabinet shop and the furniture shops, but I don't own one. Basically put just about any material I work with is stored indoors in a climate controlled building, aka my house. And not all, but most. If it's a good wood like walnut or maple or what have you, it is well dry. And some of it has, I mean, I'm using some woods that I have had since the 1980s. So I know it's dry. Can I give you a specific moisture content? No, I can't. But I need to get a moisture meter, and that's all I need. That's all there is to it. I'll put that on my list of things to get, things to do. So sorry, I'm no help for you there, Eric. But that's mainly because I can't decide which moisture meter I want to get. I really don't know. So let's see here. Let me see if there are any other questions here. I'm running out of questions. So Pete Bune says charcoal works great for black and does not bleed like a dye. I've not thought of using charcoal. I know I know that people use some odd things for dyes and for tints. And you'd be amazed at what will work and what won't work. Those of you who have subscribed to Peter Brown here on YouTube, if not, check him out. The guy's a nut, but in a good way. He does some stuff that is just holy cow good. And one of his things became he has a regular series that he posts called Dip It. And this is, can I encase this in epoxy? Will it work? And it all started with him making a handle for a vegetable peeler. And that handle, he encased a piece of bacon, a strip of fried bacon, in clear epoxy, and he turned a vegetable peeler handle with that. And as kind of an inside joke, bacon in a handle of a vegetable peeler, what the heck? But that guy does absolutely nutty stuff and some beautiful work. He has a series running, Can You Use This for a Tint? Basically, what he's come up with is just about any dry spice, mustard powder, you can use that to tint epoxy. He will grind up, jelly beans. He will grind up all kinds of stuff and use them just to see will it work. And most of them do. A lot of them don't. So I would highly suggest go hit Peter Brown and check out his channel to see whatever he's using. Steve, excellent point. Dry makeup, like eyeshadow and things like that, people use that for tints. I mean, some of the strangest things will work. Let's see here now. We got a couple more questions here. Kimberly Went wants to know, and Linda may be listening, so she can answer you better than this. Does your wife use vegetable dyes in her weaving? Depending upon what you mean by vegetable dye, she has used a lot of natural dyes that are, I guess you could call them vegetable based, things like woad and indigo, but also walnut and a few other things. Most natural dyes are plant-based, vegetable-based. But she also uses things like cake dye, dyes for frostings you can get at the craft stores. Wilton is the manufacturer. She'll use that. Okay, Kimberly's wondering about beets. No. And the reason is because those colors won't stay. Using things like blackberries, beets, things of that nature. Remember, it's a vegetable. And the first thing that happens after the vegetable ripens is it starts to oxidize. I have used a certain number of these things just in trying to stain wood with them years ago. They all eventually turn brown, and because they oxidize, they're rotting. So they won't keep that color. Some of the things you wonder how the heck they came up with this idea. Like there's a plant called woad. It's just a plant, a green plant with a yellow flower, kind of looks like mustard. Take the leaves and you boil them to a certain temp, and you add this natural chemical, and then you uh, boil it this way, and you strain it off this and separate that, and you end up with a blue dye out of a green leaf. Don't ask me how it works. Spanish moss that you find in the trees, that will make a dye. She's made dye out of that, and believe it or not, it's purple. I don't know how the chemical reaction works. Some of these can also be used for dyeing wood. For instance, there's a brand of dye called Procyon MX. I'll put it over here in the chat. Procyon MX. And it is a dye that's made for dyeing cotton and cellulose-based fibers. Wood is a cellulose-based material. I have used this Procyon. It's made by the company is Jacquard, Procyon MX. Again, not sponsored. I have used it on wood. I've used a turquoise, blue, whatever, and you can get just about any color of the rainbow. So if you're thinking of using this with wood, Kimberly, I would suggest getting the Procyon MX. It's a powder that you mix with water and use kind of like you would use an aniline dye. But you can get, again, any color in the rainbow. Blues and reds tend to be the most expensive. But, I mean, if that's what you're looking for is like a vibrant red to dye wood or something like that, I would look into using that. And they specifically state that this is for cellulose-based materials like cotton, cane, and wood. And it does work. Just know to practice on some scrap, because dyeing instead of staining is an art form of its own. You can kind of work it. I don't know if you've ever used watercolor paints. You can kind of work it like watercolor paints and, you know, brush some on, then take a clean brush with some water on it, kind of thin it down. You can step fade from one color to another that way. But it is an art of its own. And the beautiful thing about it is that much like a stain, it penetrates, but it doesn't penetrate so deep that a trip through the planer won't erase it and you can start over and practice more. It's an art form of its own, but you can get some gorgeous results using dyes. And it's made by Jacquard, and I'm going to spell that wrong, I'm sure. I will find a link to it. I believe it's JOQUARD. I may be wrong. Oops. Oh, man. I'm typing here is why I'm... there it is. It is Jacquard Procyon MX. I buy mine through a website called Dharma Trading. I'll put a link to all this down in the description as soon as we're done. Dharma Trading. And it's not super expensive because depending upon the color, you don't use much. I mean, a little jar of it is all you need. You know, and it's, $4, $5, $6, $7, depending upon how much you want to buy, what size you want to buy. But you don't need much, believe me. It's very, very strong. So, so I hope that answers that. But it is definitely a rabbit hole to get into. But I would suggest you find some. I used ugly maple. Just it had mineral marks and stains and streaks that I just didn't like. So I used that, dyed it, ran it through the planer, dyed it again until I got my hand in, kind of developed the feel for using it. But just know a little bit of dye powder goes a long way. You can always add more. Can't always take it away unless you run through the planer. Now you know why I call my planer the eraser. Because I figure if first you don't succeed, eliminate any evidence of the attempt. Okay, Sam Spade says, I'm making 3 jobs on 3 different materials, so 3 different XY0s with no idea how. All use the same 3 bits. Can I group them to cut 1 pocket, 2, then change bit, repeat on each job, change? Your better bet is to do each project one at a time. Now, having said that, you can set up 3 work locations on your table, but you'll be setting XYZ0 on those 3 locations unless you use work offsets. Your best bet is to do one project, then the next, then the next. The problems will be fewer than just doing a tool change. And tool changes don't take very long. I've got several videos here on my channel about tool changes, but the main thing is run one toolpath, it's complete, it comes over, you shut off your spindle or router, and do the tool change, reset your Z0, you don't reset your XY0. Once you set it for that first bit, you don't change it. Just touch off, do your Z0 for the second bit, do that. Third bit, fourth bit, same thing. Rinse, repeat until that one's done. Take it off and work on it while the next one's cutting. Mount your next piece of material. Do your your first tool path on that while you're working on the first project you already took off. Much better deal unless you have work offset set up and a way to go over to the next project in a known location. You'll still need to set Z0, even if you have a work offset set for that next piece. You'll still have to set Z0 and go from there. But personally, I think doing them one at a time is the better way to go. So, excuse me. Back to Kimberly's question about using vegetable dyes. There is one exception to that, and that is coffee, believe it or not. Make super, super strong a coffee, I mean like espresso type super strong coffee, that will give a pretty brown color. And even when it oxidizes, it's brown. So you're expecting brown. There you go. I mean, and that works almost identically to a dye. Um, tea, Linda is suggesting tea will work for wood, but it's very, very subtle. You don't get a lot of color out of it. You'd be better served going with a tinted finish, actually, because you'll apply uh, a real strong concentrated tea, and it looks pretty in a white cup, but the minute you put it on the wood, it just kind of disappears. Um, so, see, Lewis Denton says, my son used India ink on pine and it made a beautiful finish. Yes, India ink does work well. Um, there are a lot of people in V-carved signs. They don't use like a black paint. They use speedball printer's ink. And there are even some spray inks that they use. Speedball is one brand that I know of. There are a bunch of others, but there's a few people that I know that swear by them. So, Alan Williamson is wondering, can you use chocolate? What did chocolate ever do to you? No, I tease. You can use cocoa powder for a tint for epoxy resin, if that's what you mean. But to stain wood with, um, I've not tried it. I've not tried it. But you can use cocoa powder to tint epoxy. I've seen cocoa powder, paprika, dry mustard. I'm trying to think of some of the others that I've seen. But to be honest with you, when you look at how much a little bit of these spices and seasonings are, a dye or a tint made for epoxy is generally cheaper. I mean, turmeric, that was the other one. Thank you, Ellen. Turmeric, that's another one. I couldn't remember it off the top of my head. Not a word that I keep in mind, but you know. Um, but back to the other one, a lot of people do use the printer's ink instead of black paint when they're infilling or as a background color. So, um, yeah, Sam Spade says, if you have ever picked walnuts, the stain the shell cover leaves on your finger lasts for weeks. Walnut, um, we have a English walnut tree on the lot behind us, the house behind us. And so we have walnuts dropping in our yard. She'll take a 5-gallon bucket and she'll fill them up with these walnuts, the husks and shells, and just get about, that much in the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket, then fill it up, the whole thing up with water, and just let it sit. Just let it sit for, outside for weeks, just until it leaches all of the color out of those walnut husks and walnut shells. And then she'll strain that off, filter it through cheesecloth or metal strainer or what have you, and she'll dye with that. She's experimenting right now. I have a bunch of walnut planer chips. I was just planing some walnut, and I saved a bunch in a bag. I've got her a mason jar full of walnut shavings that she's going to experiment with to dye fiber. And if it'll work to dye a cellulose fiber, it'll work to dye wood. So that's the thing to look at if you're thinking about getting into dyes. You can buy, they call them aniline dyes, but they haven't used aniline for several decades because it's a toxic chemical. Basically, it's a non-toxic dye. Some of them have metals in them, some of them don't. But if you're into wood dyes, generally you're going to find that the woodworking dyes tend to be browns, maybe a few greens. You're trying to mimic cherry or walnut or something like that. And those dyes do work. But if you want something bright red or bright blue or bright orange, look for the dye powders and dye pigments for cellulose-based fibers, mainly cotton, rayon. There are a few hemp. There are a few others, but cellulose-based fibers. Folks have asked about RIT dye. RIT dye will work, but RIT dye is kind of a mixture of all of the different types of dyes that are made for certain fibers. You have protein-based fibers like wool, animal hair, basically wool, alpaca, what have you. Those are protein-based fibers. Then you have synthetic fibers. Then you have cellulose-based fibers, and they all take a different dye because one won't take where another one will. A RIT dye is a mixture of that. So if you use RIT dye to work with fabric, with a piece of wood, you're going to find that after it dries, you're going to get a lot of stuff off on your hands. And it's going to look kind of funky. Wherever you touched, you're going to have dry fingerprints. It'll look like you ran your finger over a chalkboard. And that is because that's the dye chemical that wasn't accepted by the wood, but it just dried there on the surface. Now you got to clean that stuff off. So definitely wear gloves when you're using dye, or you're going to have some interesting fingerprints. So, yeah, walnut worked great on fabric. I use it a lot. Yes, she does. Martin says chestnut products do some colored dyes if you get those over there. I take it chestnut products is a brand name, right, Martin? I don't think you mean the chestnut tree. So, but yeah, just look up cellulose fiber dyes, and there you go. It'll work on wood. So, but again, practice a lot, and you'll find videos on YouTube. I've never done one because I'm not an expert. I'm not a finisher. I mean, I can do enough to get by, but I am not a professional by any stretch of the imagination. So, okay, Martin says yes. Chestnut Products is a brand. So we just went all over the place, and I don't know how we got there, but hey, if it helps somebody, it helps somebody. Yes, as Linda says, this is her area of expertise. RIT contains dye for both protein fiber and cellulose fiber. When you use it, it works, but you waste half the dye. Not only that, it's expensive. So, Martin says Chestnut Products is a UK-based company, so you might not get it over there. I've not heard of them, but that doesn't mean that we can't get it. There are several suppliers here in the U.S. that do sell wood dyes, and you can Google either wood dye or aniline dye, and you'll find dyes. A lot of these wood dye manufacturers or sellers, mainly resellers, still call them aniline dyes, but they haven't used aniline for a long, long time. So, because aniline is a toxic chemical, but it's kind of like the old Kleenex has become synonymous with tissue. So they just became known as aniline dyes, and whether there's aniline in them or not, you know. Brooks Martin says steel wool and vinegar stain with tannins for blackening. Yes, they do. I've got an old video on my channel about vinegar and steel wool. You can get different reactions with different vinegars. Um, I get a home canning jar, a mason jar, Ball, Mason, whichever brand. I just put a 4/0 steel wool pad in there and cover it up with vinegar. You can do one with plain white vinegar. Look for cleaning vinegar because it's a higher acid level. It's like 5.2% acid level. Or you can use just straight white vinegar and just enough to cover the pad. I generally just go ahead and fill it up because it'll sit for a long time. Cover it up, seal up the jar, put it on a shelf, and forget it for about a month. And do another one with apple cider vinegar. And again, seal it and put it on a shelf and forget it. And it will react with the tannins in the wood and turn it anything from a purplish gray to a deep black, depending upon the wood and the amount of tannin in that wood. It's a reaction, which is also one reason why you should never use steel wool or on oak, or scrub a oak board with an SOS pad, oak cutting board with an SOS pad, because little pieces of steel wool will get embedded in that wood and you will find all kinds of black spots where it's reacted with the tannins in the wood. If you're using a wood like maple or poplar, Steve, man of the hour, there's my ebonizing wood video on my channel. It's an old one. You really got to go back to find it. I'll put a link to it down in the description as well. Thank you, Steve. If you're using something like maple or cherry or any wood that doesn't have a high tannin content, if there is a winemaking supply store near you, you can go buy an envelope. It's called gallo tannin, and I talk about that in that video. You get a little envelope. It's a white powder. You mix it with water, and it is a natural tannin taken from grape stems and grapevine as part of the harvesting process. They take all that and they extract the tannin out of that, and they sell it as a fermentation aid for winemaking. You can buy gallo tannin, mix it up with water, brush it on the wood. It kind of gives it a sandy color appearance. Let it dry completely. Then you can use the vinegar steel wool mixture on it, and boom. So you can ebonize woods you never thought you would be able to ebonize. In the video, I ebonized some poplar. I believe it's poplar I used. I don't remember. And but it works. You're just introducing more tannin, or well, all woods have tannin in it, but some react with iron and others don't. So, let's see. Alan Williams says you can get aniline leather. Is that the same? No. Aniline leather is leather that was treated with aniline. Just like you can get fumed oak. You can no longer buy the stuff to fume oak, but you can get fume pieces that were fumed. Like you can't go down and buy fumed oak by the board foot, but you can buy a fumed oak chair and to finish yourself. And that's basically, they're put into a tent and real strong ammonia fumes. I mean, fatally strong ammonia fumes are pumped into this chamber or tent or whatever, and there's a reaction with the tannins and the wood, and it takes on a antiqued appearance. Then you get it, evacuate those fumes and get fresh air in there, so you can get the piece out and finish it from there. But it's a similar process with aniline leathers that they've been treated with leather or treated with aniline. But I won't say you can't buy aniline, but it is a toxic chemical. And I mean fatally toxic. I would kind of stay away from it. But the leather, that it's all been neutralized, so you're good there. Do you use your pretty wooden jar lids on the? No, I don't. Those pretty little jar lids were made for Linda's tea stash, and that's all they did. If you're new to two-sided machining and you want something that is a conversation starter and you want something that people love, that's a good project. I'm going to write that down. And I'll put a link to that series. It's a two-part series. One is drawing the design and the other is actually cutting it out. It was my first two-sided machining project video series that I did on YouTube. The number of people who got a hold of me wanting to know how much I would charge for a set of 4 of those mason jar lids is unreal. People love those things. And I don't want to, I'm like, dude, I just literally showed you how to make them yourself. Why do you want me to make you a set? Go ahead and, I don't want to make jar lids for the rest of my life. Go ye forth and make. People love those things. And what you charge for them, and they don't have to be for mason jars. You can do them for candy jars, the big candy jars. I've been gonna do one. I've got a candy jar in there I need to get on. So Ellen says, I just recently found my coffee can of steel wool. I will give that a try. How long does it take? A few weeks. It can work overnight, depending upon how strong the vinegar is. But generally speaking, I'd give it 2-3 days. Let it sit in there because the acid is actually breaking down the iron in the steel wool. It's dissolving the metal. And you'll want to strain it before you use it because you don't want metal bits in your wood. But throw some steel wool into a jar, pour some vinegar over the top of it, close it up, and set it off to the side. Leave it alone for a couple, 3 days. I tend to go for a week, but that's just me, and I kind of have a perpetual thing going, where the jar is full and then eventually it kind of evaporates because, they seal well, but I'm not home canning, so I'm not activating that seal. And I'll just go in and top off a little bit more vinegar. And it just stays there because I don't always use it. And I may go a couple of years without using it. So a big cookie jar lid for your live streams, Mark. Well, we'll see. We'll see. That may happen. I have VCarve Desktop 11.5. How do I turn vectors on and off? Okay. Let me bring up, I have Aspire 11.5, but I don't have VCarve 11.5, but it's the same thing. Let me create a new file here. All right, we'll get into it. This is VCarve, or excuse me, this is Aspire 11.5. No audio. What happened? Okay. Oh, what? No, my mistake. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, there we go. I hit the wrong button. I removed myself from the studio. Okay, let me back up and regroup on this. All right. Okay, I'm now in Aspire 11.5, but it's exactly the same as VCarve 11.5. Okay. Up here, we have a layer manager. The layer manager gives you quick access to your layers. I can add a new layer here, or I can add them in the layers tab. So I go layers, and here is, I can add a new layer there. This comes in handy when you've got a lot of layers, like I did with my Pirate epoxy inlay. Now, 99 times out of 100, you'll use the layer manager. If you want to add a new layer, you can add it here. Or, let's get some vectors out here. I've got that. And I've got this. Whoops. And I've got this. Close. And I've got this. All right. Let me get these moved around here so that they make a little bit of logical sense. Anyway, so, okay, I've got vectors out here. Now, your question was how to hide them. Well, you'll need to put them onto different layers. Then you can turn those layers on and off. So, let's say I've got this one here. I'm going to keep it on layer 1, but I'm going to rename layer 1 rectangle. So I just click the title, rectangle, tap enter. Now I can either add a new layer here, or I can select the circle, right click, move to layer, new layer. And I'll name that layer circle. I'm going to leave the new layer visible. And I can even change the color if I want to. So I'll make that light blue. Click OK. Now that circle is blue. This square is rectangle is black. If for some reason I need to hide this layer, this circle, I can just go up here and you see the little light bulbs right next to these icons here. Little light bulb turns on and off their visibility. Now it's grayed out and the circle is not visible. Now the light bulb is on and the circle is visible. I can right click, move to layer, new layer, and we'll call this star. If I make this star yellow, I will be the only one able to see it. So we'll go with kind of an orangey color. You'll still be able to see it. And we'll make this one red. Oval, move to layer, new layer, and we'll call that oval. We'll make it red. Okay. So if I want to focus on one layer and just use this vector, I want to work on this vector, I can come up here to my manager and I can turn all of these off. You'll notice that the word rectangle is in bold letters. That's letting me know that that layer is active. Anything I do out here is going to be on this layer. So if I draw another star over here, close, it's on this layer. If I go to my star layer, there's my original star, but I've got another star. If I click on the word star, now that becomes bold. That's the active layer I'm working with. Now I can turn off the rectangles and that star went away. Turn it back on. I can turn them all on. But the layer that's in bold is the one you're working on. So anything you do out here is going to be on that layer, whether the other layers are visible or not. If I want to move this star to the other layer, I can right click and I can either copy it or I can move it. If I want a copy of this star over there, but I also want to keep it on my rectangle layer, I can just copy it. If I want it to move over to the star layer, I just right click, go to move layer, go to star. Now when I click off, it's the same color as the other one. It's no longer on the rectangle layer. The way to keep track of which layer is active is to look right up here. The active layer, the name will be right up there. If I change and make rectangle active, click off down here, now rectangle is up there. I can turn off all the other layers and just work with this one. And then when I'm done with that, I can come back and turn the rest of them on so that they're all visible. Now, that was a long way to go. Hopefully that answered your question. But that, Gene, is how you turn vectors on and off, by turning on and off the layer that those vectors are on. Okay. So let me take that off of full screen. Almost did it again. That's hit the wrong one. Channel members, you guys know, here lately for my channel members only live streams, I've been using Zoom. And so I have forgotten more about StreamYard than I ever knew. And I actually took myself out of the studio. That's why you couldn't hear me. So thank you for sticking with me. And thank you for letting me know no audio. All right. Russell Faraday says a steel bolt in an oak boat keel can send deep black streaks several feet along the grain, but takes decades. Yes, sir, it can. Yes, sir, it can. If you look at just a fence picket, a cedar fence picket that's had a steel nail driven into it, whether it's galvanized or not, you have black streaks where those nails are, black streaks running down the board. That's exactly what that is. That's the iron in those nails reacting with the tannin in the cedar. So, yeah. cleaning vinegar is stronger than what you can buy in the grocery store. You can get cleaning vinegar in some stores, but look at the acid content. It's like, I want to say it's like 6%, whereas the vinegar we eat, in sauces or seasonings or whatever, is generally speaking about 3.5, maybe 4%. But you can get stronger vinegars, but you generally have to go to chemical supply or specialty shops to get them. They do have, you can get stronger um, vinegars. Ammonia can do things to wood tannin as well, but be very careful with it. Then we're just talking mainly about the fumes. The old photocopy machines, there was a photocopy vinegar, not vinegar, ammonia that was used, and it was knock you on your face strong. I mean, opening the bottle at arm's reach and wearing a respirator was basically required when you were getting into that stuff. Wicked, wicked stuff. So be very careful if you're playing with ammonia. All right, we've been on for about an hour and a half, and I seem to have gotten all the questions. If I haven't gotten to all of your questions, put them in the comments, and I will try to get to them as quick as I can. I'll get this real fast here. You just made it. How can I create a hexagonal screw head with a wrench size of 10 millimeter? Let me go back over here, and this is an 11.5. Delete all these. Aspire doesn't play nice between the two versions. I have 11.5 open. That's what I'll show. What we'll do is we'll go over here to draw a polygon. All right. Now, I have inches, but it's the same if you want to do millimeters. Okay. The wrench size, it's a hexagon, so we're looking at number of sides is 6. The size radius doesn't really matter because we're going to cheat. I'll just draw this out, 4 inches. Okay. And there it is. There's my hex. Now, here's the secret, Hubie CNC. Select it, resize. What you'll want to do is make certain that you have link XY checked. Okay? And you're going to come down here to the height. I've got a flat up here and a flat down there. I want that height to be 10 millimeter. So, would do, it's going to automatically change the width. Don't worry about that. You're looking at from flat to flat. We'll click apply. That made it even bigger on mine because this is inches. But now I want it to be 10 millimeter. No, I'm not going to do that. Never mind. I would switch over. I could do that. No, I'm not going to do that. Never mind. Basically, that's it. Draw the hex. Get a flat on the top and a flat on the bottom. Come in here to set selected object size under transform objects. And if you have a flat on the side and a flat on the side, go for that. Okay, that's the same way how I make it. Yep. And again, this is one of those cases. If it works for you and you're getting the result you want, you're doing it right. So, yeah. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I mentioned it earlier that members tomorrow, Rob Sandstrom is going to give us a presentation on epoxy inlays. He's going to answer some direct questions we've had on calculating the volume, how much resin you need for an inlay. We're also going to get into vector overlaps and why they're needed and how to create them and what happens if you don't use them. So that's tomorrow, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. Uh, Channel members, there's a link on my community tab. Here, after this is over, click on my name, then look for community and click on that. That's a link, and you'll find the links. I will be doing this show on StreamYard, and hope to see you there. Um, can't you change inch to millimeters in size? You can convert it. You can convert it to metric, but when the project is set up for inches, there's a lot of conversion that you have to do to take, what I could do is I could go online and get the imperial measurement for 10 millimeters and then size it to that. But basically, what you're thinking is, and that's almost where I went, what you're thinking is convert this 10 to metric. It's just going to give you however many millimeters. So, yeah, I didn't want to get into that just now, and I just did. So anyway, um, um, so yeah, channel members tomorrow, more epoxy stuff with Rob Sandstrom. Be there or be square. If you're not a channel member, you don't have any clue what I'm talking about, or you'd like to become a channel member, down below this video panel, they keep moving it around. You'll see a little join button. Click on that button. A panel will pop up and a video will play, tell you all about channel membership. We'd love to have you aboard. It's a great, great group of people, and we have a real good time. Next week, I'm not even going to try to attempt to say what I'm going to have because I don't know yet. It may be part 5 of the Absolute Beginner series. Between you and me, it probably will, but that's a good thing. I get your comments. I love your comments. I appreciate it. I see what Gina is saying. I noticed in VCarve Pro there's an icon in the upper left. By clicking, the vectors are turned off, on and off. Not in 11.5. That's a new feature in version 12 that you can turn the vectors off and on. That not in 11.5. Anyway, thank you very much for spending part of your Sunday with me. I've got a chuck roast to go throw on the grill, and yeah, that's everything. Go out and do something cool. Have a great day. Thank you for spending part of your Sunday with me, and y'all take care. Go make some chips or go have a bag of chips. I mean,